Today on Inside Utah Politics, incumbents trounced in their primaries. We'll meet two of the Utahns walking away from the election as presumptive state representatives. A former AG candidate charged with a felony. How Frank Mylar is responding to the controversy turned criminal case now. Former President Trump says he's picked a vice president. Find out who's likely in the running as we count down the hours to the convention.
Time now for Inside Utah Politics.
Thanks so much for joining us, everyone. I'm Brien McElhatten. Let's go inside Utah politics now. And we begin now with the results of Utah's primary now finalized, which means we officially have some upsets on our hands. Both Democrats and Republicans in the State House saw incumbent representatives knocked out of their primaries, some by wide margins. And today we're going to take some time to meet the newcomers who've already shaken up the composition of the Utah House of Representatives. So we're joined now by Cal Roberts. He's the GOP nominee for House District 46, which represents a big chunk of South Salt Lake County, centered right on Draper. Welcome to the show, Mr. Roberts.
Thank you, Brian.
And congratulations on your victory there.
Thank you very much.
So let's take a look at the results here. You beat Jeff Stenquist, who was in office since 2019. You got 71% of the vote. How do you think you got here?
Good question. I've served on the Draper City Council for several years, so I've gotten to know my voters real well, the folks of Draper, and I've knocked on thousands of their doors and listened to them, and what they told me consistently was the things that mattered to them most were the quality of life issues. So housing affordability, rising cost of living, energy costs, traffic, infrastructure, congestion, those kinds of things. My message was focused, laser focused on really moving their interests at the state capitol and representing those local issues, and I think that message just resonated with the voters.
I can tell you feel strongly about this in talking with your constituents. Tell me about the time you decided you wanted to get involved in politics and you made a move for city council in Draper. What went into your decision making there? Yeah,
good question. One, I've always been interested in politics. I've always had this idea that public service can still be noble. And servant leadership is something that's important to the community. But two, the thing that really got me into politics was I was appointed to this board, this local tax board over a special service district in Draper. Got to know a little bit about how local government works. And ultimately there was a seat that opened up. I thought I could do a good job advocating for my neighborhood at that time. And that's why I jumped in 2019 and served on the Draper City Council for the last 5 years.
What's the biggest lesson you took away from your time on the City Council that you think you can apply to a role as a representative now?
Yeah, all politics is local. And increasingly our politics are becoming so national. The national narrative is just driving so much of it. But I think folks are really craving just a focus on their local day-to-day quality of life issues. And if you've talked to a mayor or a city council member, that's the stuff we're focused on, right? Getting the garbage collected, making sure the potholes are filled. Those aren't the sexy issues that make the front page of the New York Times, but they're the issues that impact people's day-to-day life. And I think that kind of representation and focus I can transfer to the state capitol and be effective.
I want to ask you about something. The Point development falls in your district,
yes,
and side of the former state prison, right? What are the plans going forward on that? What's the state's role in that big project?
Yeah, great question. So the prison site development currently sits on state-owned land. So the land use authority doesn't sit with the local municipalities. There's a land use authority board that governs what happens at the Point Authority. They've already selected a development group. If you drive by the prison site development right now, you'll see a lot of dirt getting moved. They're doing infrastructure. They're laying pipe and roads, so you'll start to see some growth there. The challenge is going to be with the difficult macroeconomic environment. When do you actually get started growing? But the Point really does represent a set of challenges for my community with traffic congestion and those kinds of issues, but it really also represents a great opportunity. We can tackle home ownership, housing affordability through the Point. We can generate high-quality, good-paying jobs at the prison site development. So, I'm excited to work on that issue and really be a voice for my community and ultimately on how that area develops.
What do you think is the biggest challenge facing that district right now, your district?
I think growth.
Yeah.
And I think that's common throughout the state. I mean, if you're on the Wasatch Front, we've all felt it. In fact, the Utah Foundation did a survey, I want to say last year, where they found 3 out of 5 Utah voters feel like their quality of life has gotten worse over the last 5 years. Why is that? Well, it's rising cost of living, which is associated with growth. It's housing unaffordability. You've got a whole generation, my generation, millennials, that are increasingly getting priced out of the housing market. And folks are struggling with growth and change, right? You've got a lot of traffic. It was a lot easier to do your commute to work every day. It's not the same anymore. So, I think the big issue impacting my area is growth. How do we manage it? How do we manage it? How do we do it right? And how do we figure it out?
So is that going to be one of your priorities once you take office there in the Capitol? Yeah,
I mean, that's what I'm interested in. My professional background, I've got experience in economics, development. I worked on Wall Street for several years, representing large private and public companies. So I get, budgets, taxes, those kinds of things. But I've also worked in finance, in real estate, so I understand as well the growth question, and that's the issues that I want to tackle.
So we say take office because you're the presumptive representative-elect because you're not facing any challengers as we head into the general election. What's that like, envisioning yourself sitting in the state Capitol building in a few months' time, really?
Yeah, I don't think it changes much.
Yeah.
I think politicians run into problems when they get detached from their district and they stop listening. I think I've learned being on the city council that you've got to stay close to the voters. You got to understand what's important to them. I don't see that changing when I'm at the Capitol. Again, like I said, I want to be laser focused on some of those local issues impacting Draper and a part of Bluffdale, which I represent. I want to make sure that they get the shout out too. So I don't expect it to change much. Politics is interesting. There's always interesting dynamics at play. I learned a lot about that on my city council, learned how to work with folks on the other side of the aisle, learned how to work with different folks with different views. So I think I can take that to the state Capitol, and I'm excited. I'm so excited to be able to represent Draper and Bluffdale at the state Capitol.
Well, Cal Roberts, I wish we could talk more. I'm sure we'll talk again. Thanks for having us. You bet you were on student council when you were in school back in the day, weren't you?
Yes, 4th grade treasurer.
I could tell. Thanks so much for being with us. We
Thanks,
appreciate
Brien.
it. Hey, still ahead on Inside Utah Politics, taking a look at the caucus convention system. We're taking stock of what it did for candidates in high-profile races this primary cycle. And coming up, getting down to brass tacks with Project 2025. A lot of you have asked us about that. We'll walk through just what it is and how politicians on both sides of the aisle are responding to it. Stay with us. Welcome back, everyone. Now that the dust has settled on the primary election cycle, we're taking some time now to look at that caucus convention system here in Utah, particularly on the GOP side of things. Our Jordan Tracy has the story after hearing from candidates and party leadership, too.
Some of the candidates who won at this year's Republican convention failed to repeat their success in the primary elections. In big-ticket races like governor, Senate, and attorney general, signature-gathering candidates won by wide, comfortable margins. It comes at a time when the caucus and convention systems are under some scrutiny. The Republican caucus for president here in Utah saw low turnout, less than 10%, with many voters expressing confusion and frustration over the process.
Found out that as a registered Republican, I cannot vote here. And one of the reasons is now they say you have to go to a caucus. You're not giving a lot of choice for people to be able to vote.
Then delays the night of left some voters unable to cast their vote for president.
My neighbor and I both pre-registered 3 weeks ago. We were organized. We were excited about this. And to be disenfranchised this way, I mean, it's not democracy.
The convention this year was also critiqued for having a hostile atmosphere. Lieutenant Governor and State Representative Kara Birkeland saying they don't plan to bring their families back next time. Governor Spencer Cox got some of the worst of it, a harsh chorus of boos as he walked up to give his speech. In that speech, the governor seemed to question the efficacy of the convention.
I am so proud to be welcomed here today, the same way you have welcomed lots of Republican governors over the years. Governor Herbert got booed here and lost by 10 points, but won by 40 points in a Republican primary.
Cox later clarified that he loves the caucus convention system, but feared the atmosphere there gave ammunition to those who would like to see it end.
And so a big part of what I would like to see happen, and I believe that the caucus convention system can help provide this, is meaningful, respectful dialogue. The few bad apples, we'll call that out. I've called it out a number of times.
Utah GOP Chair Rob Axson says while things may not have run perfect this year, the caucus convention system still did what it was meant to do: give voters a chance to meet candidates and give upstart candidates a chance to compete before money comes into play.
If there's no relationship aside from paying for a TV ad and then expecting to vote for you based off of that TV ad, it's hard to believe that you will be connected to the people.
Axson went on to point out that of the 24 races at the state party level, only 6 of the convention candidates failed to advance to the general, which he says can be explained by differences in fundraising and name recognition. Frank Myler was one of those 6. He was just a few votes from winning the convention's nomination for Attorney General outright, but in the primary, he placed in a distant third.
You go to a primary, it's all about money. You don't reach very many people. It became a money and dollar game. And I think people really need to question, is that how we want to select our candidates? That whoever has the most money wins.
His opponent, who won the race, Derek Brown, outspent him nearly 9 times over. Brown got on the primary ballot via gathering signatures. It's an expensive, time-intensive process. That path has been in place since 2014, but Myler would like to see it done away with.
I'm not blaming the candidates that followed Utah law to do that, but I am blaming the legislators that put it into place, and it's high time that we do something about it.
Myler has joined a coalition of candidates that includes gubernatorial hopeful Phil Lyman in filing public records requests to get access to signatures gathered by several candidates this year. There are no proposals to change or replace the caucus convention system at the moment. For now, the Republican Party is focusing on November. Jordan Tracy, ABC4 News.
The Salt Lake County District Attorney is charging former Republican primary candidate for Attorney General Frank Myler with bribery now. Fellow candidate for Attorney General Trent Christensen says Myler texted him offering him a job in his office if Christensen endorsed him. That was just over a week before the Republican convention back in April, which Myler ended up winning, of course. Christensen tells us he was sad to get the text and felt he had a duty to report it.
Initially, when I filed the report, people said, what do you want to have happen? And I said, I don't want to have anything happen. I just trust the system. I did my duty. My duty was to report it, what I thought was a violation of the law.
Well, Myler later texted back that he didn't realize Christensen was still in the race and asked him to ignore the texts. Christensen reported the conversation to Murray Police, and the district attorney tells us the cases are rare, but they're serious.
Luckily, that doesn't happen that often, so that's a good thing. But certainly about 2008, I also prosecuted another previous case when I was the city prosecutor.
Now, we reached out to Myler for comment. His attorney responded, telling us Myler denies the allegations. He plans to plead not guilty and looks forward to defending himself in court. The race for the Republican nomination in Congressional District 2 is in recount territory now. Congresswoman Celeste Malloy leads businessman and veteran Colby Jenkins by just 214 votes with the latest round of ballots counted. Now, that's tight enough that by state law, the candidates can now request a recount. Congresswoman Celeste Malloy, however, declared victory Tuesday night. Jenkins tells ABC4 this isn't over yet, and he actually had some issues with how some mail-in and unsecured ballots were processed.
I'm glad to have some finality. I know we're in potential recount territory, but I don't anticipate that a recount will change the outcome. I have confidence in the county clerks and their teams and the way they've done their jobs, and I want to really thank them.
You don't declare victory, you fight for it. As I've seen the county officials stand up and scratch their heads and say, this isn't right, we want to reinforce them and make sure that every eligible vote is counted.
So after the statewide canvass next Monday, Jenkins will have 7 days to file a request for a recount. And that recount will need to be conducted within 7 days of that, which will also include re-examining all of the uncounted ballots. The Utah Supreme Court decided a lawsuit against the state legislature over the new redistricting changes can indeed move forward. In a unanimous ruling, the state's highest court upheld the lawsuit challenging the Utah legislature's redistricting boundaries set in 2020. They reversed a lower court's ruling and will require them to review whether the legislature overstepped in amending a ballot initiative that Utah voters passed back in 2018 that formed an independent commission to formulate statewide district boundaries. A gaggle of Utah political leaders are planning to be in Paris for the kickoff of the 2024 Summer Games and hopefully for the announcement that the Games are coming back to Utah for 2034. Our delegation to the International Olympic Committee will be 21 strong. Utah Governor Spencer Cox and Salt Lake City Mayor Aaron Mendenhall will be a part of a core group of 7 that will make our final pitch to the IOC. 5 other elected leaders, including House Speaker Mike Schultz, Senate President J. Stewart Adams will be in town as well, and we hope to have the IOC's final decision around 4 a.m. on Wednesday. It's getting close. The Republican National Convention is kicking off in Milwaukee tomorrow, and former President Trump still hasn't named his vice presidential pick. Former President Donald Trump says he has selected his running mate, though, but he's not releasing the name just yet. Florida Republican Senator Marco Rubio and Ohio Republican Senator J.D. Vance are seen as potential Trump running mates. Also on the short list here, North Dakota Governor Doug Burgum, South Carolina Senator Tim Scott, Florida Congressman Byron Donalds, and New York Congresswoman Elise Stefanik also on the list there. Political science professor Todd Belt said there's a key component to winning that is missing from the group of names.
They don't bring a state that Donald Trump needs, and they don't bring a constituency that Donald Trump needs. These are normal politician calculations, and Trump is not a normal politician.
That convention will run until Thursday night. Something many of you have asked us about, Project 2025. It's getting the attention of Republicans and Democrats now. The conservative plan is a sweeping overhaul of the federal government proposed by a closely aligned group to former President Trump. Our Washington correspondent, Rashad Hudson, dives into what exactly the proposal entails and how the public is reacting.
House Democrats say they are focused on defeating Project 2025.
It's a collection of extreme MAGA ideas.
The Conservative Heritage Foundation is behind the plan. It provides a detailed blueprint for overhauling the federal government. It would restructure employees, policies, and federal agencies, including eliminating the Department of Education. California Democratic Congressman Ted Lieu calls it concerning.
I mean, this document is creepy. It's a takeover of the American form of government.
Over the past week, many Republicans have distanced themselves from Project 2025. Former President Donald Trump said he knows nothing about it. Potential Trump running mate, Ohio Senator J.D. Vance says the former president has his own plan.
What the media and the Democrats are trying to do is attach its most unpopular elements to the Trump administration. It's a 900-page document. I guarantee there are things that Trump likes and dislikes.
Florida Democratic Congressman Maxwell Frost says he heard from voters about the plan.
They're scared to death of Project 2025 and the far right wing.
Democrats hope Project 2025 will motivate voters to back President Biden. Reporting in Washington, Rashad Hudson.
Coming up, diving into another State House upset. We're sitting down with the man who successfully unseated one of Utah's longest-serving Democrats.
You're watching Inside Utah Politics.
Welcome back, everyone. We continue to follow the now largely finalized results of the primary elections here in Utah, and another incumbent upset on election night. We're talking about the Democratic primary for House District 24. Joel Briscoe has been serving in that Salt Lake City seat since 2010, one of the longest-serving members of the House in either party. And now he's lost a primary to challenger Grant Miller, who took home nearly 50% of the vote. Grant Miller joins us today. Thanks so much for being here on Inside Utah Politics.
Well, the pleasure is all mine, Brian. Thank you for having me.
So let's start here. You work as a public defender. You've been in law for a long time. What made you want to jump into elected office and serve that way?
So I've been practicing as a trial attorney for about 7 years. The vast majority of that time, I've been a public defender. One of those guys that if you can't afford an attorney, one will be provided for you. That's you. That's me.
Okay.
And as I started working through the court system, I saw that a lot of things were, I would call it like a broken system. And then I started realizing, oh, these things aren't broken per se. The system's working the way it's designed to work. And when there's problems with the system that's designed to work that way, you have to reevaluate the design. And that's when I started thinking about a legislative solution to all of these problems. I don't really distinguish between my work as a public defender and my community advocacy. I became a public defender because I wanted to help people in vulnerable situations. And my campaign for the state legislature was an extension of that very same goal.
So you go for Joe Briscoe's seat. He's been serving for 10 years, and you chose to challenge him there, right? So what went into that calculus?
Correct. When I thought about my campaign, I didn't really think about the race as being independent of itself. I saw the race as being part of a larger marathon to advance democratic values in our community. He served the district very well for about 14 years. And I'm at a new leg of the race, ready to receive the baton. I think that it's healthy when you have a community that puts up different community leaders to allow for options in the democratic discourse. And I lived in a district where we really didn't have any challenges from the right, and there weren't very many challenges from the left either. And I felt that it's when you have a public office, it's important to have diversity in that public discourse. So I threw my hat in the ring.
So have you been in touch with Mr. Briscoe or the party since your primary results?
Yes, I have.
Yeah. And what have those conversations been like?
Positive. Representative Briscoe's been very gracious. He's offered his assistance in the transition, which I really appreciate. The party is very curious. I know that Mr. Briscoe has served the community and the party well, but the party has also been very gracious with the turnover. There's sort of an interesting transition here because I'm not the only new legislator from the Democratic caucus to make their way to the legislature. There's a few races that will show that we'll have new faces up on Capitol Hill as part of the Democratic caucus.
So let me ask you this. You are running unopposed now because you don't have a challenger as we go to the general election. So you are the presumptive representative-elect.
That's correct.
So what are some of your priorities when you take office?
Still consistent on what I campaigned on. Homelessness being really one of my top focuses. My top three campaign issues was homelessness, access to reproductive health care, criminal justice reform. And I particularly see homelessness and criminal justice reform as being interconnected. As I worked through the court system, I saw how people could come into the system through nature of their circumstance. You know, they might be indigent living on the street and they'll be arrested for crimes that are related to trespass or camping, whatever it might be, brought into the jail. And once they're in jail, they get released shortly thereafter. There's no foresight into how to exit people from incarceration in structured ways so that way they have a chance.
There's support needed there.
Correct. Yeah. And we're starting to see a shift in the courts where people are starting to see the benefits in releasing people to mental health treatment programs, substance abuse treatment programs, and then utilize wraparound social services from there. And we're getting a lot of buy-in from the courts, but the problem is the resource. We need more resources. To give you an example, some of the mental health treatment providers have a wait list of about 18 months, and that includes folks that I have that are currently incarcerated waiting for a bed as some place to land. In that focus, I think being able to bring more resources, whether that's privately or through the state, using that legislative office to try to focus on where the gaps are in our homelessness crisis and in the criminal justice system, that's my primary focus.
Yeah, okay. Mr. Miller, we appreciate your time today. Thanks so much.
Thank you so much, Brian. It's a pleasure.
We do hope to talk with you again.
I hope to be here.
Okay, good luck in your new office there.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Absolutely. Hey, stay with us, everybody. More Inside Utah Politics coming up right after this. Don't go anywhere. Well, that does it for today's Inside Utah Politics. Don't forget, if you have any local political stories you'd like to see here, make sure to reach out to us. You can email InsideUtahPolitics@abc4.com. You can also follow along with me on social media, on X @Brien Reports, and on Instagram, just search for Brien McElhatten. And you can find ABC4 on social media as well to follow along no matter where you are. And while you're at it, download the ABC4 News app. We're always on there. Thanks so much for being with us, everybody. We will see you right back here next week.